Today I'm going to share with you a 9-step process that you can follow for leaving your country for good. Whether you want to pay less taxes overseas or you're tired of seeing fewer and fewer freedoms in your country, I'm going to share with you how you can leave comfortably even if you never want to come back. And I recently hosted our annual live event called Nomad Capitalist Live, where hundreds of people came from around the world, and we shared not only some of these tips, but we heard what they're doing and how they're successfully, in many cases, moving overseas, what they're doing to get comfortable in their new location or locations, and how once they do that, they're often not looking back. Once you get comfortable living in some other place, you'll often start to see the flaws of the country that you're living in, and that's our mission here at Nomad Capitalist, is to share the fact that you may love your country and you may even want to stay in your country, but helping you understand the reality that your country, if it's a Western legacy brand country, is probably going down in financial freedom, down in personal freedom, down in almost every metric. And there are lots of other countries they can compete with. So here's the process that you can follow to find greener pastures somewhere else. Imagining that you have your own income you're going to bring with you, you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, you have a remote job, you don't need to make money somewhere else, and imagining that you want to leave in 1 year. Here's the process. The first thing you can do that's relatively straightforward is checking your banking. For as many issues as Americans have with their taxes and stuff like that when moving overseas, banking is actually a little bit easier for Americans, but everybody else, you may be required to close down your local bank accounts. Now, this is not tax advice. You can certainly go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn how we and our team around the world can help you put together a plan. But in many countries, you don't want to keep the bank account that you have in your country. And if you have businesses, that's an extra thing you have to deal with. So figure out where you're going to bank overseas. One of the things that we talked about at Nomad Capitalist Live was how to open bank accounts in countries like Georgia with very small amounts of money, up to opening bank accounts in asset havens for mid-6 up into the 7 figures. You want to know where you're going to be banking, and quite frankly, if you're going to be opening bank accounts overseas, I probably don't want to rely on just one account. I want to have different accounts in different jurisdictions that serve different purposes. One pays my bills, one stores my assets, maybe I've got a brokerage account or a private bank that makes my investments. And so get comfortable by starting to open those accounts now, and also understanding whether you can keep your accounts in your own country. And so you don't want to be moving and while you're doing that, opening bank accounts, because particularly many places you might want to move to might not be the best places to bank. And so people who talked about moving to Mexico, for example, talked about opening very small bank accounts just to pay local bills. You can even do that with Wise, by the way, by using other accounts to pay bills in Mexican pesos. But if you want a local account, that's fine, but you may need to get the residence permit first, which means it's going to be a longer process when you can go to countries like Georgia, Singapore, elsewhere in the world and just open those bank accounts for bank's sake. So now you have some money in another country. Now you're getting comfortable with the financial part of not having all your money in your home country. That's the first thing I would look at. I would start to understand, do I get to keep the banking in my home country? U.S. banks are going to be better for that, but there are some U.S. banks that even though the government doesn't care if you keep the account, again, not tax advice, but the banks may not like you. So a lot of online savings accounts in the U.S. are just designed for people who live in the U.S. They're not going to like you going and living overseas. So understand what your bank's requirements also. The second thing that you want to do is survey potential places to live, or decide that you want to go on some kind of tour for the first year of your existence overseas. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, here's a list of 6 places I want to go to, and my first year abroad is I'm going to go through them. So for me, I really wanted to go to Asia for my first part of the world overseas many, many, many years ago. So one of my first big trips after years of just traveling from the United States was I hit every country in Southeast Asia because that's where I really wanted to focus on, and that's where I discovered I really like Malaysia. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I want a place that's a bit more upscale, so identify the upscale places. I want a place that has certain freedoms. I want a place that has certain taxes. Make that hit list. We help our clients do that. Okay, what's your priority? Is it finance, freedom? Is it lifestyle? What things go into that? Let's make a list of 3, 4, 6 places. You can either go to those places over the next year before you move, and you can go based on a little bit more faith, i.e., hey, I went to Kuala Lumpur for 2 weeks, I really liked it, let me put my effort into that one. Or you could just say, hey, the first year is going to be hitting all these different places and then making a decision. That option may be a little bit more difficult because, again, without a residence permit, you can have more trouble getting local bank accounts. Obviously, you're going to be more focused on staying in Airbnbs or hotels, which is going to give you a bit of a skewed version of the lifestyle. I'm probably in favor at this point of just saying, go and visit the places that you like. Maybe you already have a place in mind, and say, I'm going to commit to 1 year in the place that's number one on my hit list. If I like it, I'll keep living there. If I don't, I'll pivot somewhere else, because that way, by getting the residence permit, setting up things, I'm going to have a lot more comfortable lifestyle. I'm going to be able to get more of my flags planted in terms of banking. And if I don't like it, I can always leave and go somewhere else, and I'll have my second priority that I can just go to next. But I'm going to have the infrastructure set up. But you want to be able to basically have a list of potential places to survey, and in that year, potentially go and hit some of them up if you don't already know where you want to go. The number 3 thing you want to do is, once you have that hit list, understand how you're going to live there. If you watch American television, for example, you're going to think, oh, I'm just moving to France, I'm moving to Spain, I just go. And I've talked to a number of very successful Americans, for example, who've said, I went to Europe and I didn't realize after 88 days I had to leave after 90 days. They're like, are you gonna leave pretty soon? They just thought, oh, I just thought you just went and moved there. You can't. You have to get a residence permit, for example, or you have to have citizenship. And so if you're moving to Europe, you could have, let's say, citizenship in a European country that you got by descent through your family tree. We're helping a number of people right now get citizenship in various European countries. One gentleman who came to the event is eligible for Slovak citizenship. He doesn't want to live in Slovakia, but once he has that Slovak citizenship as an EU member state, he can go and live in Portugal, for example. He can go and take advantage of that using that passport. So he's American. He can get the European passport and then choose from any of those countries. We have other people who are getting Malta citizenship, where they're investing close to $1 million into Malta. They're going to get that within the next year and a half. And then as a Maltese citizen, live anywhere they want in Europe. If you're not going to live in Europe, look at residence permits, for example. Whether it's Asia, whether it's Europe, whether it's Latin America, you can get a residence permit by showing wealth, by making an investment, by even just having an income, particularly in Latin American countries. Show us you have some money coming in every month, and we will give you a residence permit. But you can't just live there. And even if I'm going and scouting around places, or even if I'm just going to, even if I'm going to live in a couple different places, I think that the days of going on visa runs is coming to an end in many places. Mexico, for example, you look at the visa chart. A lot of Western citizens can go to Mexico for 180 days. We've had past Nomad Capitalist lives in Mexico, and people have reported, they ask me, how long am I here? Show me your return flight ticket. And when the flight ticket's 2 weeks from now, you get a 2-week visa. That's your visa stamp when you come in. So the idea of living in Mexico for 6 months, going out for a week, coming back, and effectively living there without a residence permit, in many countries around the world, it's becoming the standard. They want you to have a residence permit. And so you don't want to screw around with that. What's your basis for living in the country that you want? You've heard me talk over the years about the trifecta, where you live in 3 different places, 4 months of the year. You're still going to want a residence permit in most cases to do that, whether it's a digital nomad visa, residence permit, golden visa. There's lots of different options, too many to go into here, but how are you going to live in that country? The number 4 thing is you want to understand your new taxes. One thing we talked about at Nomad Capitalist Live was taxes are not just on income. We talked about dividend taxes, royalty taxes. We talked if you own a business that may be offshore, but you're working for the business. We talked about if you have remote workers in your business. There's lots of different factors that come in that could tag you in certain countries. We talked about how in Dubai, for example, there are people living there thinking they're paying 0 tax, and then they have U.S. dividend income, U.S. royalty income. And they're actually going to pay more living in the UAE than they would living in certain countries. So you want to understand wherever you're living, if it's one place, how do the taxes work there? If you're an American, we suggested having tax neutral places. Could be 0 tax, could be territorial tax, could be tax exempt. Because that way, since you have a tax return still to file in the U.S., even though you're dramatically lowering your taxes, you don't want to make things more complicated somewhere else. But understand the taxes not just on income, but dividends, royalties, everything that's coming in. And if you've got a lot of dividend income, you might be better off living in a country in Europe than in a traditional tax haven. But understand the tax burden. If you're living in different countries, when do taxes get triggered? Okay, so for Americans, we talked about, hey, it's easier. You can. It's a little bit because you're always taxed in the U.S. But if you're Canadian, how much time can you spend in Canada before you're taxed? If that's one place you're going to spend time, so you want to understand your global picture. It's easier if you just go to one country and live there full time, as long as that country is tax friendly. Then you've got one system to figure out. But if you're living in different places, how do you make sure everybody stays happy? How do tax treaties work? There's a lot of things to figure out. This is one thing that Nomad Capitalist connects all of our clients with, all the different tax professionals around the world. We put the pieces together so that you have a comprehensive global understanding of your taxes. You don't want to go and live in Spain 4 months a year and figure out, oh, well, because I live here and here and here the rest of the year, Spain's going to suck me into their tax system. So number 4, understand taxes where you live. Number 5 is understand your old taxes and that you can't just leave. We talked about how Australia, like many Western countries, is starting to tighten the noose a little bit on if you leave the country, you can leave the tax system behind. You do not have to give up your passport to leave most Western countries' tax systems. But how much time you spend there and where you spend your time outside of the country is increasingly becoming a factor. Just leaving and saying, I can do whatever I want, is not working anymore. It's not just a day's test of as long as I spend fewer than 183 days in the country, I'm off the tax radar. There's proper things you want to do when you're exiting your country and then requirements you want to maintain after you leave. So, again, too many people are moving to Dubai, for example, and just, I set up a company, I got a residence permit. That's great. Do you understand your tax requirements at home? Do you understand the tax requirements where you're going? Not just on income, but everything. Do you understand other places that you may be, other places you may have employees, other places you may have your business set up? You need the whole thing figured out. But where you're leaving, you want to figure that out. And if you've got a business in your old country, how are you going to move that as well? That has to be factored in. So that's what Nomad Capitalist helps people figure out. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com. Here's what we saw at Nomad Capitalist Live. People who did move to traditional tax havens, people who did move to Dubai, they're following the herd. Nothing wrong with Dubai, but if you're following the herd and you don't realize you're actually going to pay more tax in Dubai than you would in Dublin, then you've done something wrong. But guess what? Nobody in Dubai is going to tell you not to set up in Dubai and to actually go and get holistic advice or to, heaven forbid, move somewhere else. Their goal is selling you on Dubai. One thing that we run in our business, one thing that we talked about at our event, I'm agnostic. We talk about so many different places here, not because I'm trying to promote places, as some people think. I'm trying to talk to you about all the different options that you have. There's certain things that I prefer. You may prefer something different. But one thing you'll never get at Nomad Capitalist is you have to move here because that's what we sell. We've got a full-time R&D team that spoke at our event, and they talked about how we create new opportunities all the time. We just created a new citizenship opportunity that I don't think almost anyone has uncovered, but we talked about it at Nomad Capitalist Live, and we're starting to roll it out to our clients. It's a place we had to go and knock on doors in the local country because it's not very well promoted, but there's the law, it's there. You're not going to hear about that when you call someone in Dubai. So whether you're trying to lower your taxes, get citizenship, whatever, we put the R&D effort into actually figuring out things that work, and we help you holistically. Let's talk about number 6. You want to talk to your family. Now, if I'm married, I'm probably having some of the aforementioned conversations with my spouse, but now I'm going to start to talk to the kids. I'm going to start talking to the parents. I'm going to start talking to maybe the brothers and sisters if you're connected. I'm going to start even talking to my friends, and I'm going to start telling them what I'm thinking about doing. I'm going to understand, because I've done some of this work, I feel more comfortable than they do with this process. And so as you're planning this process, your friends and family may not entirely understand. I'll tell you, my own family, I have watched, even my parents, as I've done this more, they've opened up. They've started doing some of the stuff we talk about. And sometimes that's how it has to work. You get the family on board by you being the example. And you're also going to realize that as you make this journey, you're going to see who your real friends are. I've got a friend who visits me almost every year at my birthday. He flies nonstop 12 and 15 hours to wherever I'm at. And he's been a true friend for close to 15 years. Other people, the minute I left, forget you. But I'm going to start having those conversations to assess where I'm at, to start getting my own immediate family on the same page, to get their input and press forward. This number 7, on just a purely personal perspective, is I'm going to figure out a transition plan for my stuff. What are you doing with your house? Are you selling the house? Are you renting it out? When I left the U.S. for a while, when I was traveling a lot, I invited a friend to live with me just to make sure no one would screw with my house when I was gone. When I left for good, I brought someone from my family in, and they and my friend knew each other, and so they lived there and they kept the place. And eventually I said, you know what? I'm not coming back. I'm selling the house. What are you going to do? I would encourage you to be realistic. Oh, we're going to Airbnb our house out. Okay. I mean, there's going to be some challenges with that. What stuff are you taking with you? What stuff can you buy there? All right. Now, if you go to Nicaragua, we had some people move into Nicaragua during the pandemic. Tax friendly, was pretty open. A lot fewer things to buy in Nicaragua. On the other hand, if you move to Ireland or somewhere in Europe, you have Amazon. They'll bring the stuff to you. You can order stuff from all over the EU. It's easy. It gets dropped off right at your door. So you've got to kind of understand where you're going and how moving your stuff factors in. Some people are, minimalist. They take very little with them. They treat, they have a big garage sale and they're done. Other people have stuff they want to take with them. I think when you start moving furniture, that becomes a little difficult. We do help people with logistics like ships and moving cars. We've done that before. The less of that stuff you can do, the better. If you just take a number of suitcases, what can you buy there? That's something you want to figure out, because I think for a lot of people, their stuff, and that could include even pets, is a factor. Is there a quarantine? I can tell you, there's some countries that we had someone recently they wanted to go to, and every single time they would go back to one of the countries, the pet would be in quarantine for 14 days. They had to write off that country. So that factor, well, what am I doing with my pets, my stuff? That has to be figured out. Number 8, I'm starting to get into the mindset. And let me just tell you, just saw hundreds of people for 4 days at Nomad Capitalist Live. Mindset is important. You want to get down to brass tacks and only talk about facts, you're going to miss the big part that stops most people. What I did was commit to 1 year and say, all right, if I don't like it, I'll come back. Now, from the tax side, in some countries, you may have to sell your home or rent it out on a long-term basis where you can't just easily kick the guy out in a year, because that would be seen as you didn't really leave. So if your goal is tax savings, you've got to plan that out in some countries. Again, for Americans, it could be a little bit easier. What I did was say, I'm going to go for a year. I figured I would stick with it, but I'm not going to come back for a year. You might choose to come back for a holiday or some brief period of time, but I would try and be out as much of the year as possible. And I would see what it's like. And if I hate it, I'm going to raise the white flag and come back. In some countries, you may lose the tax benefits for that 1 year if you come back so quickly. I'm not giving you tax advice, but generally, 3 to 5 years may be better. And then what you want to do, number 9, is build the same infrastructure that you have in your home country. Because the more you commit, the more you're going to see the benefits of this. So getting health care, get a hospital somewhere else. By the way, it doesn't have to be in the same place. You can live in an emerging country and say, hey, I'm going to go to the country next door for my main health care. I'm going to live in Cambodia for the opportunities and just to see a country emerge. But I'm going to go to Malaysia or Singapore for my annual health checkup if I need any surgeries. Or it can be in the country, but I'm going to get myself health care. I'm going to get health insurance where I live. I'm going to join some clubs. I'm going to do whatever that I do, and I'm going to try and recreate that lifestyle. And so those are 9 steps that you can use. During that process, I think action begets more action. You'll eventually diversify as much as you need. You'll get more bank accounts. You'll get international brokerage accounts. You'll start thinking about international investments. You'll start thinking that a residence permit could turn into citizenship. But if the goal is to leave your country, for whatever reason, obviously the tax part has certain tax consequences you need to plan out. If you're looking for more freedom, if you're looking for a better lifestyle, that has its own consequences. We talk about finance, freedom, and lifestyle. We ask the people that we work with at Nomad Capitalist, which are the priorities? And the plan adjusts based on those things. But those are 9 things you need to work on. First thing, bank account. Easy thing you can start. You can go to nomadcapitalist.com and go through all of our free resources on that. You can also go to nomadcapitalist.com and learn how we can just put together your own bespoke plan for what it is that you want, whether you're making a plan A or whether it's more of a plan B. Those are 9 steps that I've seen just recently, hundreds of people talking about how you can make moving overseas work for you and how you can actually enjoy the benefits of more freedom, lower taxes, better opportunities longer term by setting yourself up for success.